Dislike the title of this video if you want, but something must be said. The phenomenon is weird. Most of them show only Qorvex strength, and without exception, most left its sea of weaknesses and incapabilities buried within the flowing rules, fearful of what is underneath. It is undeniable when proper investment is given while playing into a frame's biggest strength, he can look good, but at the end of the day, the truth always lingers. The facade of Qorvex being strong immediately falls apart the moment you compare him to any other frames. He is just weak. Imagine this, Qorvex has the Valkyr and Oberon reworks poor design aspect, yet had none of what makes Valkyr and Oberon post rework bearable. At least the latter had a formidable kit strength to back them up, like both of their passive. Qorvex has none of that. Starting with his passive, weapons wielded by Qorvex have an additional +3 punch through. On paper, that looks way better than 50% of the passive in this game, but remember what Qorvex aims to achieve: damage his enemies through Crucible Blast. This passive, as expected, doesn't even apply to the beam. The only place where it is a viable passive is when you are trying to focus on single target weapons, but like, that's it. You can say his tool with the Augment, but brother, this only works in Simulacrum. Next is his first ability, Chivingker Pillar. Formalities aside, this ability itself is not good. Outside of spreading Crucible Blast effect and prime radiation status on enemies to allow better damage, it doesn't have anything that makes it stand out. The radius is pitiful even at 190% range, the slow is inconsequential and also capped, has line of sight requirement, just all in all a middling ability that serves only as a medium for Crucible Blast that also doesn't do it well. Even then, this is already the better part of Qorvex. We haven't even talked about the worst yet. Speaking of that, Containment Wall. Yes, grouping, but as you can see, a straight line. Qorvex's primary form of damage is a radial area of effect. What I am showing here is already the best case scenario for this ability. The moment I am not in Simulacrum, this ability will immediately look 10 times worse. You know, just use Cyotid at this point, let alone Nautilus. His third Disometric Guard, however, I swear I saw this somewhere before. I wonder where. Disometric Guard is just hideous resistance with a different coat of paint, whom only seen some users recently along the nerf arcane persistence on health tanks who had no status immunity. If hideous resistance is already a choice, on top of Firewalker and Spellbind, what proves Disometric Guard otherwise when there's nothing on top of the status immunity? As you can see, outside of Crucible Blast, all of Qorvex's ability is severely underpowered. Not only that, his kit is all over the place, held up by hopes and dreams of a very interesting team. Yes, they are synergies, but where is the consistency? All synergies that DE gave him all live individually within their own bubble, and they barely had any meaningful interaction with his own abilities. For example, the quote-unquote Empower synergy. It only applies to his first. How about the rest of his abilities? Is Coherence still in the room with Qorvex? That's why Herald's kit is still easily top 3 in terms of design. The synergy is through the ability itself, not forcefully added to make it seem like there's any, and all of them are anchored by 3 key aspects: precision headshots, shields, and energy. There's no quote-unquote added requirement to force a synergy with X and Y only, as the idea is anchored and implemented throughout, instead of being a random bunch of ideas that lives within their own bubble. Even if I put the synergy talk aside, Qorvex still isn't safe, even when it comes to his best ability. Crucible Blast is clearly the center of Qorvex, from his 2 trying to cater towards it and his 1 having true direct interaction on top of priming radiation status to increase its damage. It is hard to say otherwise. Crucible Blast works well through enemy density, and that is the main argument against the narrative that Qorvex sucks. Many Qorvex players always like to say, quote-unquote, "You didn't build enough ability range on Qorvex, that's why he is not good." As if Qorvex didn't rely on enemy density instead of ability range to nuke. Range on him, despite being the quote-unquote best stat, still serves only as a complement to enemy density scaling, and you don't want to overinvest on that, and instead go for some ability strength to kill faster, and this is the shot I go with. You don't need all plus 15% ability damage shots in my opinion. Nothing within his kit complement the fact that he wants enemy to come towards him as well. Investing in range doesn't fix that, okay? Not to mention that radiation makes this even harder. This is why Qorvex relies on Nautilus so much to even hit good kill speed. The best showing of Qorvex, you know, is with Nautilus, because a Qorvex without Nautilus is like losing over half of its intended power. And because of this, why do you need ability range like many would assume? Nautilus is doing most of the job for you. All you need is to ensure 3 status proc to proc Manifold Bond, aka the thing that allows Cordon to trigger in quick succession. There is no place for Containment Wall, as what it could provide is easily replicated and done better through the utilization of Nautilus. And because of enemies being grouped together, the beam is the better radiation priming tool when paired with its augment, which also leaves Charinka Pillar pointless to cast if you don't aim to play around it, which also counters the issue that Charinka Pillar brought. Speaking of its augment, holy Jesus, don't even get me started. I find it funny when some Warframe YouTuber tries to paint the narrative as quote-unquote Fuse Crucible isn't a Bandaid augment as it creates a different playstyle, when Fuse Crucible is by definition a Bandaid augment and managed to put Gyra, who is commonly associated with Bandaid augments, to shame. Fuse Crucible straight up allow you to move around and shoot your beam continuously, solving his poor survivability issue by allowing extended invulnerability, thus opening him up to shield regen gating setup. Drain per second is also easier for Qorvex to mod around. With 185% duration plus neutral efficiency, this only costs 10.81 energy per second with a ramp up of 0.27 per second plus an initial cast cost of 25 instead of 100. Qorvex can also cast Crucible Blast briefly, aka burst cast, to play around the fact that his pillars can spread the explosion, allowing you to prime enemies constantly through the usual primers like Epitome or Bourbonical, while not burning through energy reserves. In my opinion, not a single augment that is considered by many as Bandaid is remotely comparable to what Fuse Crucible is to Qorvex. The moment you took the augment off, all of his problems just becomes 10 times worse. Even though Qorvex is capable of being a competent nuker on high density situation, but when he is put in missions where density isn't high, he performs substantially worse as his power shines the most with density. But what makes him worse is that all other density focused frames at least have something else to keep them afloat, like Octavia. Without Mallet, she is still invisible, can crowd control well, can buff his teammates with invis, speed, multi-shot and melee damage buffs, on top of Amp being a universal Serration type damage increase. As you can see, Octavia still have access to many different tools when enemy density is low, and they all pack strong punch. But Qorvex? Brother, let's not talk about that. Not to mention that without any subsumes, augments, or even a dedicated pet on Qorvex, he simply cannot perform at a decent pace at all. Helminth should not be mandatory for a frame to even be serviceable. The frame itself should meet that standard. And this applies to companion too. I get that you can rely on pets to get better results, but when the pet literally dictates your viability, that is when the red line is crossed. This is why he is weak. Not only his nuke is outshined by a considerable amount of frames, he doesn't have anything else to give when he is put in situations where he is out of his comfort zone. He is designed like a jack of all trades. Yet they make it seem like he is a one-trick pony who suddenly cannot perform outside of that one situation. Once Qorvex moves away from Crucible Blast, he has nothing else to offer that will left many eyebrows raised. There is a reason why I state that abilities outside of Crucible Blast being middling or weak, you know. Say tanking through health, no healing, no DR, no armor percentage buff, no additional way of making himself tankier. None of his abilities cater towards it. Say support, you know what, I will just let the footage speak for itself. Say crowd controlling, you know, the role designated to him, he is serviceable. Even by just radiation based frame alone, both Nyx and Oberon easily outshines him in this category, and it's not even close. Say utilities like grouping, debuffing, and defense removal, just cut it bro, easily the worst in the game. Look, it's not that I want to compare, but if it isn't able to be competitive enough, like at least being the middle of the road like all jack of all trades frame follows, what justify Crucible Blast having detrimental downsides when the other aspects of his are nothing but pitiful? There's no excuse when Caliban is also another traditional jack of all trades frame like Qorvex, but have so much more going on in return. You don't even need to list out where Caliban is good at. All you need to do is just by looking into his abilities. Caliban is just a very standard jack of all trades, and that's why I use him as a standard to compare. Good at everything but not amazing at one or few particular job. Very common trait that most jack of all trades possess. What does Qorvex have to be comparable against Caliban? Nothing. How about Nerza? How about Gara? The list can go on and on. I can make Qorvex look good, but is Qorvex himself any good? No. Qorvex is easily the worst frame in this game because he is just so underwhelming at everything else that isn't nuke. Even if you look it in the lens of quote-unquote jack of all trades, he also had nothing else to prove itself worthwhile to be picked over all other jack of all trades, who did everything he does, but better. His design is an incoherent mess, and his kit strength is just so under the standard that I just don't get why people can glaze him like he is definitely not the worst. He not only needs a buff, not only needs a full rework, he needs a complete redesign. So that's Qorvex for you. I know it may be hard to accept that Qorvex is quite possibly the weakest frame in this game right now, because that applies to me as well. I like Qorvex. I like his team, but seeing him having such a middling performance while easily outshine really makes me as a Qorvex enjoyer sad. I did not ask him to be the next best frame. All I want is just a Qorvex who is capable of competing with the rest of the rosters. Not just a one-trick pony who knows nothing but enemy density and had to severely rely on a companion to even be competitive. At the end of the day, I don't get the glaze behind Qorvex. What's the point of the glaze when the frame isn't living up to even the most basic standards? See you all next time. Goodbye.